Hello guys and welcome to our session for MSBI tutorial. I hope that all of you can hear me and see my screen. Thank you for responding. So shall we get started with our tutorial for MSBI? All right. So let us get started and see what we have in our plate for our MSBI tutorial today. So the agenda for today is why business intelligence? Why do we need this? What is BI? What do we mean by business intelligence? What are the BI tools that are available in the market? Why should we use Microsoft BI? What is Microsoft BI? We will then look into the architectures of the Microsoft BI. What are the different tools and utilities available in Microsoft BI? And we'll have a demo on the complete Microsoft BI suite. So let's get started. Why business intelligence? This is the question of the hour. So let's take a look. Why do we need business intelligence? You see, some of the issues that we faced over time is that we have large amount of data in front of us, which is scattered across the sources. Because you see, if you're working in a data warehouse or in a data related environment, there are a lot of data that those comes from different sources, and all these sources are different external sources. So for a scenario, you can see that if you're working in an organization, if you're working in a project, all this data comes from different sources like Oracle, like they can come from flat files, they can come from Excel, and all these data are scattered. Like flat files can have a different set of data, Oracle source can have a different set of data. Data is poorly documented. What happens in this data, since they are raw data, they are not well documented. So if you try to analyze those data, you will have a tough time to do that. Monitor the dynamics of the changing trends. In a live business scenario, every day the scenario is changing. So if you have to be, have an edge on top of the peers, you have to monitor the situation, how it's going through. Gain insights from the data or predict the future. Only once if you can analyze your data, then you can take business decisions and you can do the predictive analysis, how your business is going to take shape going forward. So all these scenarios gets you the feel why do you need business intelligence, because you have to analyze the data. Once you have problems and you use business intelligence and you have the solution to do your business one step further. Let's take a look. What is business intelligence actually? Business intelligence, it's a process that transforms your data into information or knowledge using a computer-based technique that enables user to take effective decision based on facts. So you see, you have your data coming from different sources, raw data, which you have to analyze. On top of those data, you perform your knowledge analysis, you gain the information. Then you can make your business decisions so that your business will take a leap forward. But how do you get started with BI? It's very simple. Get started in 5 simple steps. First, identify the problems or the opportunities that you have. What is the problem that is making you take this decision? Gather the required data. Whatever data you can gather all them. No data is enough. Explore the alternatives. Once you've gathered your data, try to explore the alternatives, what you can do. What are the alternative options? Those are available for you. Try to gather those. Then analyze your data and perform QA operation. Once you have got your data in source, analyze those data. Once your analysis is complete, QA, perform quality and assurance on that. And once that is done, you can finally take your business decision. Now let's talk about some BI tools. But before I talk about some BI tools, just want to have a quick check. Are we clear with the concepts of BI, or do I have any questions? All right. Thank you guys for responding. So now let's take a look into some BI tools. So if you go into the market, you'll find a lot of BI tools available in front of you. You have Oracle BI, you have SAP BO, you have Logi Analytics, you have Tableau, MicroStrategy, ClickView. Everything is there in front of you. But out of which BI tool is actually going to suit you? Which is the thing that's going to take your business forward? Microsoft BI. Microsoft Business Intelligence is the tool that we will be talking about here. And we will also explain why we are talking about Microsoft BI. What advantage does it hold over its peers? Look into that. Why Microsoft BI? MSBI is more responsive to the dynamic business trends. If you do any kind of business analysis, MSBI is the most responsive one to any business trends. It supports for historical data and summarized data. It supports large amount of data. If you're working in a data warehouse, you can perform historical analysis and summarize the data. It eliminates the instinctive or gut feeling decisions. If you're working in a business, if you are the decision maker, you cannot take a decision based on your instinct or gut. You have to take business decisions based on an analysis, and that has been done by some tool. It minimizes the error-prone manual work. If you're doing anything manual, it's bound to give you some error because humans are built in that way. So that's why if you work with a tool, you're reducing the manual work error mechanism. It supports very rich advanced analysis, SSIS, SSAS, or SSRS. These are the three components of MSBI. If you use these components, it supports a very advanced level of analysis. And then finally, you can make effective decisions based on your analysis. So this is a Gartner 2016 Magic Quadrant. So if you look in this one, the x-axis, we have the completeness of vision. And in the y-axis, we have the ability to execute. So if you look into this chart, this is Gartner. They are one of the leaders in market research analysis. According to their result set in 2016 February, Microsoft is a leader in both completeness of vision and ability to execute. So we have only Tableau and ClickView, but still if you look into that, Microsoft is a big leap ahead apart from all of their peers. So you see all the other companies, all the other products, they are lying in a different quadrant. Microsoft is leading the chart when it comes to BI analysis. So let's take a look into what MSBI is different with other tools. Let's take a look into this example. We have three different systems. We have a Microsoft system which consists of SQL Server, we have Oracle system, PLSQL, and IBM's DB2. The total cost of just the server is $25,000 for IBM and Microsoft product. For Oracle, it's $40,000. Let's see what on top of we require for our BI analysis. We now talk into the concept of manageability. So if the manageability comes into the picture, if you're using an Oracle system or an IBM system, you have to do a lot of manageability for that. First, you do partitioning. For Oracle system, that will include more $10,000. You diagnose the Oracle system, another $3,000. You tune the database, $3,000 more. Same thing for the IBM systems. If you do a performance monitoring or a performance improvement, $10,000 more. But in case of our Microsoft SQL Server, everything is included. Now let's see what else can we do. Now you have finally got your database set up, everything done. You want to do BI. So what's going to happen in case of Oracle and IBM? You have to again go for another suite because Oracle only comes with their own database, no other tools included. Same case for IBM also. They have given you only their database. If you want to perform any BI activity, you have to go for other tools. So Oracle, if you go for BI bundle, $20,000 more. You want to do data mining on that, more $20,000. If you want to do OLAP, if you want to perform a cube related operation, again $20,000. Same things for IBM, cube, $20,000 more. DB2 warehouse, $75,000 more. DB2 cube services, DB2 OLAP services, $35,000 more. But in case of Microsoft SQL Server, everything comes included. You don't have to do anything. High availability. If you want to use availability, the always on availability, it's a property of the SQL Server. By default, it comes with it. You just have to enable it and you're always on. But in case of Oracle, you have to use Data Guard, which is pretty expensive, stands at $116,000. If you want to use IBM's always availability, you have to use Recovery Expert, which stands at $10,000. So the cost, you can see it's piling up. Multi-core. By default, SQL Server supports multi-core. If you want to use multiple cores in SQL Server, you're free to do that. That comes part of the SQL Server installation. But in case of Oracle, it stoots another $116,000 to $232,000. For IBM, it's $160,000 to $165,000. So you see the cost is again building up, going on and on and on. The cost is building up. So you can see in this slide, what is the difference? Why people will go for Microsoft SQL Server over an Oracle DB or an IBM DB2. The cost is huge for other places, but in case of Microsoft SQL Server, you're getting the same functionality, some case more functionality, more features, robustness, scalability, everything at a very competitive price. So that's why MSBI has gained a lot of market share over the time. This is the salary comparison when it comes to BI professionals and other professionals. So if you just see a data scientist, the average salary will be around in the range of 120,000. If you talk about a BI manager, it comes around 105,000. If you talk about a data architect, it comes around 100,000. So you see people who are working with data, you just talk about the lower quadrant of the chart. Data analyst, 62,000. BI analyst, 71,000. And this is not something that we have made up. This is a national average salary from Glassdoor. So there are a lot of advantages if you work in BI. Now let's talk about what is Microsoft BI. So before I move to Microsoft BI, do I have any questions from our previous slides? All right, so I'm getting a question. How is Microsoft BI different from Tableau? Okay, so Tableau, it's another organization, they make a reporting tool. So Tableau supports reporting, but in case of Microsoft BI, we have a complete suite. It starts from ETL, analytics, and reporting. So you see Tableau has only one product to offer. In case of MSBI, we have a complete suite. Does that help? All right. Do I have any other questions from anybody, or shall we proceed? All right, people are clear. So let's proceed then. Now let's talk about what is Microsoft BI. Microsoft BI, and we call it as MSBI acronym. It stands for Microsoft Business Intelligence. This is a very powerful suite which composed of tools which help you in providing best solutions for business intelligence and data mining queries. This tool uses Visual Studio along with SQL Server. So you see, when you install SQL Server, you get Microsoft BI suite as part of the SQL Server installation. You don't have to buy a separate license for MSBI. Okay. Now, how it differs from a traditional process? Why are we emphasizing so much on MSBI? So you see, what happens in a traditional process is that we have data scattered across all the networks. But in case of MSBI, we can manage the data. In case of a traditional process, we don't ensure the ROI, which is the return on investment. But if you use MSBI, you can perform business analytics and it's very high on return of investments. In traditional processes, we don't interpret the raw data. We don't have a mechanism to interpret the raw data. If you're working in a traditional process, if you're not using BI, you don't have a process how you can interpret the raw data, which is coming from different sources. But if you're using a BI tool, especially MSBI, you can discover the data, you can use machine learning and take business decisions. Now, again, if you have a traditional system where there is no BI, it's very difficult to share and understand what kind of data you're working on, what will be the business decision. But if you're using MSBI, you can visualize the data and you can perform reporting on the data so that the business users will have a clear visibility and they can take the business decisions. So tools and utilities. What are the tools and utilities those are available in MSBI? So we have three different components in MSBI. We have SQL Server Integration Services, SQL Server Analysis Services, and SQL Server Reporting Services. So if we talk about MSBI at a core, what happens is you have SQL Server at the heart. On top of it, you have the ETL tool, extraction, transformation, and load. That tool is called as SQL Server Integration Services, from which you can perform ETL operation. Once your ETL operation is complete, your data is loaded into a SQL Server, you want to perform analysis, right? So in that case, you will leverage SQL Server Analysis Services, on which you can make your cubes and analyze the data. So once your analysis is complete of the data, you use SQL Server Reporting Services. It helps you in creating reports and share it across the board, people who are required to use the report. Let's look at my MSBI architecture, how the architecture of MSBI is distributed. This is how your MSBI architecture is distributed. If you come here at the bottom quadrant, we have all our external data sources. You see here, Oracle, can be an Oracle source, can be a flat file source, can be a SQL Server source. So once your data source is there, you use SSIS or SQL Server Integration Services to load your data into your data warehouse. So your data warehouse can be SQL Server, can be anything else. So SSIS supports multiple data sources. It does not depend on you can have only one kind of data source. You can have multiple data sources, and it supports in performing the ETL operation. So ETL, as the name suggests, you can extract the data, transform the data, and then load the data. So there are a lot of transformations which are available in SSIS. So once your data is loaded into a SQL Server, you want to analyze. How you do that? Using SQL Server Analysis Services. You create your cube and it has all the analyzed data. Now, once your analysis is complete, the final step will be the reports, because if you're making any business decisions, the best way to visualize anything is creating a report. Use SQL Server reporting services. You have your reports created. Now, in case of reports, it's very flexible and very powerful. You can have reports in Excel. You can have your reports in Power BI. You can have your reports in SharePoint, all these things. So I'm getting a question. What is a cube? Okay. So whenever you create your SQL Server Analysis Services project, you don't use your SQL Server database data. You create a cube in the Analysis Services project, which holds all the pre-aggregated data which you require for your analysis. So this is a different concept. In normally databases, we have RDBMS, those are relational data. But when you analyze the data, you need the performance of the analysis, right? So in SQL Server Analysis Services cube, we have data stored in multidimensional way. So that's a different way of representing your data. Why we represent in a cube? Because it's way faster than a traditional RDBMS system, because all the data here are pre-calculated. That's part of cube. Does that make sense? We will have a demo on this and I can explain more on that. All right. So now once your data is analyzed and you've created your report, you can publish your reports. You can create dashboards and you can publish the report with the whole team who are required. That performance is also available in SSRS. All right. Let's see what else can we do. Now let's talk about a little bit of SSIS. SSIS stands for SQL Server Integration Services. This is the tool that helps in performing the ETL operation. Before I move into SSIS, just want to have a quick check. Are we all clear with the concepts or any questions? All right, we are clear. So let's take a look what SSIS can perform. Why SSIS? So see, whenever you're a business developer, whenever you're a business manager, you have this question coming into your mind: how to process the data into a warehouse, how to migrate the applications, how to manage the SQL Server objects and other updates. So these kinds of questions bug you. How can you build your data warehouse? How will you process your data? Your data is coming from external different sources. How can you build it in, load it into a data warehouse? If you want to migrate an application, how can you do that? If you want to manage your SQL Server objects, how can you do that? In this case, the only thing that helps you is that if you can only get integration services. All these problems can be solved using SQL Server Integration Services. So SQL Server Integration Services, or better known as SSIS, it's a component of our SQL Server database software that performs and you can be used in a broad range of data integration and data transformation tasks. So you can integrate your data as well as you can transform your data. Integration means merging of data from different stores. That is, it can be from fact file, it can be from Excel, it can be from SAP, Oracle, anything. SSIS supports all these different data sources. So you ingest your data from there. Based on your business requirement, you transform the data. Now, what do I mean by transforming the data? It can be a simple data conversion. Maybe your source data is coming as a string. You have to load it in your data warehouse in a date format. You can perform that. What else can you do in the transformation? You can perform business logic also. If you want to, use SCD, slowly changing dimension, you can do that. What do I mean by slowly changing dimension? This is a concept of data warehouse. What happens here is that you want to perform and historical analysis. You want to keep a history data, so you can perform that. All these functionalities are available in SSIS. Okay. So what is data transformation? It combines the data residing in different sources and provides users with an unified view of this data. So you see, data might be coming from external different sources, different sources. You can have a unified view of all these external data sources. Workflow. It can also be used to automate maintenance of SQL Server database and update to multidimensional analytical data. So you see here from SSIS, you can perform SQL Server related jobs also. So if you want to back up a database, if you want to clear an index on a SQL Server database, these options are also available from here. On top of it, what we can do, if you want to use something from an analysis services perspective, that's also possible. You can call an SSAS cube, you can process that, you can perform other things also from SSIS. So this is how an SSIS looks internally. So you have your operational data, which is coming from different sources. You perform the ETL operation on top of your operational data, and then you load it into your data warehouse. This is how you can perform ETL operation using SSIS. So what is an ODS or an operational data? An operational data store or ODS, it's a database designed to integrate data from multiple sources for additional operation of the data. It's not something different from a database. It is a database, but it's designed in a different approach. This is the place where most of the data used in current operation is housed before it's transferred to the data warehouse for longer term for storage or archiving. So what happens whenever you're loading the data from different external sources? They're sending a raw data. So what happens? We keep a dump of that data into an ODS system so that we don't lose it, because your external sources can be lost. If you're using a flat file, those flat files can be deleted. If you're using an Oracle table, the table can be truncated. So what will happen to your raw data? Obviously, if you're loading into a data warehouse, you're keeping historical data. But what happens if you want to check something on your raw data? We keep a dump in a system called as ODS. Okay, so let's take a look how the ETL process works. So I'm getting a question. Wouldn't there be inconsistencies if we combine data from different sources? Yes, that is a good question. So that can happen. So if you're saying that if we have 3 different systems where data is coming, if we try to combine them, there can be inconsistencies. But it all depends, how the business wants to perform the logic and how your data warehouse is created. In a general scenario, obviously, we will not try to combine data from different group. So maybe one data is coming from account, one data is coming from customer. We don't want to group them. But in a large system, what happens? Same kind of data comes from different vendors. So if you, let's say that it's a banking application. In a banking application, customer related information comes from different systems. But if you want to keep it in a unified place, we use this process to unify the data and keep it. So yes, obviously we have to keep grouping of the same kind of data. But yes, in that scenario, when different sources send you the data, you unify it and load it into a data warehouse. Does that help? So one more question I'm getting, where is ODS located? So ODS, as I said, it's a logical representation of a physical database. So depends on the design or the modeling of your data warehouse, ODS will be there in SQL Server. Once you load your data from different sources into a dump, that will be loaded into ODS. Okay. Does that help answer the question? All right, great. So let's see how an ETL process works. ETL, as the name suggests, extract, transform, and load. It's the process of extracting the data from various sources, transforming this data to meet your requirement, and then loading into a target data warehouse. So you see, we have all these different sources coming. We have XML source, we have COBOL, we have flat file, database, everything. You transform the data, apply your business logic, and then finally load it into your data warehouse. So this is the process that we use in ETL. Okay. Now why I'm saying is data warehouse, what is a data warehouse? So in this slide, you'll have an understanding the difference between your operational data and a data warehouse. So operational data is something that is loaded every day. So let's talk about a business scenario so we can have a better understanding. Let's talk about a banking system. Whenever you go and swipe your card, you get a text that this much of amount has been debited from your account. So I'm getting a question, what are the transformations available in SSIS? Just give me a sec. I will have a demo on SSIS and I'll explain what are the different types of transformations available in SSIS. Is that fine? All right. So as I was explaining, let's talk about a banking scenario. You swipe your card and you get a text immediately. This much of amount has been debited from your account. So what happens in those scenarios? The banks keep a track of your account and they send you a data. They get the data updated in their systems immediately and they send you a text. Those kinds of things happen in an operational data source or known as OLTP, online transactional processing. Now, being you a customer, you have been associated with the bank for let's say 10 past years. So what will happen? They will not have your history data. Yes, of course they will have that. So if you perform any transactions over a month, that depends on a scenario where you want to load your data into your history OLAP systems. Can be a week, can be a month's data, can be 3 months data. In this scenario, let's say that the bank loads that data from their OLTP systems to their OLAP, the data warehouse, every month. So every month, after every month, whatever transactions you have done based on your account, they will load it into their OLAP system so that they can have an history for you. And how do they do that? By using extraction, transformation, and load. Maybe the history data does not require all. Maybe they don't require all the hourly related activity. They need a summarized data. They can do that using ETL. They load it into their data warehouse, and finally they create their cubes. Those are OLAP cubes. Now once your cube is created, you performed your analysis, then you send your data to the business user. So you see, banks will give you different kinds of scenario. If you take this kinds of loan, you will have this much of attractive interest rate. How do they do that? Is that they have their historical data, they analyze that, and they perform the BI. One question that I got here is, how is data warehouse different from a normal database? So physically, they are both SQL Server databases. Logically, if you say that data modeling will be different for an OLTP system and an OLAP system. So OLTP systems normally will be very normalized because they will have transactional data. But OLAP systems, since they will have historical data, you have to perform analysis, so you have to write a lot of queries. So those systems will be denormalized. There are different kinds of systems that you can make. If you want to create your OLAP cubes, then your data warehouse must be in multidimensional model. But in case of our OLTP system, your database can be an RDBMS. It's in a relational model. So there are fundamental differences between OLTP and OLAP systems, but physically they are both SQL Server databases. Does that help? All right. Let's proceed. Let's see what else can we do. Now let's talk about an SSIS package. What is an SSIS package? What all things it has? So an SSIS package consists of mainly two parts, the control flow and the data flow. Now inside the control flow, we have our control flow elements, we have our connections, we have other things, and data flow, we have all our data related activities. So if you want to perform any operation which deals with data, if you want to do that, you use data flow. Apart from that, we have connections. What are connections? These are nothing but your connection managers. Whenever you're creating a connection to any source or destination, you have to create a connection. So let's, for an example, you're using an Oracle DB as a source and SQL Server as a destination. So you have to connect to that Oracle source and SQL Server destination. So in those cases, we use connection managers to set a connection between your source and destinations. These are the drivers which come default part of SSIS installation. So you don't have to do anything, difficult to get it connected. But if, of course, SSIS is flexible, if you want to use any different sources which are not natively available from SSIS, you can invoke that and connect to them. Control flow elements, data flow elements, I just talked about. Apart from that, you have other things like event handlers, variables, parameters, and configurations. Event handlers, what does this mean? Event handler talks about what happens if something happens in your package, any kinds of event that is fired. For an example, you're running your package and maybe because of some scenario, your package failed. So how will you get to know if it's running from, a live system, from a production environment? You set up some event handlers. So what will happen if your package fails? SSIS package will trigger an event and it will let other people know that the package has failed. Now don't get confused and don't think that event handler only works for failures. It works on numerous other occasions also. So I'm getting a question, can we connect to cloud source? Okay, starting with SQL Server 2016 and SSIS 2016, Microsoft has enabled connection to the cloud. So you can connect to Microsoft Azure systems and you can use them as source data. Okay, does that help? All right. What else do we have? We have variables, we have parameters and configurations. Let's talk about configurations first. So if you have developed your package in a dev system and if you want to deploy it into some different systems, obviously that's going to happen because if you have developed it in your dev, that package will eventually be deployed into production or a live system. So how things will change? For an example, if you're using a flat file source to load it into a database, your flat file source will be coming from somewhere which is your local drive. But in production environment, the path will be different, right? The server that you're using to load your data and perform your development, that server is your dev server. In production, that server is definitely going to change. So how will you let the SSIS package know that when you will be deployed in production, change all these things? Use configurations. This will tell the SSIS package on which environment, which will be the value for the shared path for the flat file, which will be the value to connect to the server, which will be the value to connect to the database. All these things you can look into and go configure in the package and it will be taken at the runtime. Variables and parameters. What happens in SSIS if you want to perform something using values which are coming at the runtime? So you can use variables and parameters and you can pass the values and perform operations on that. Okay, let's see what else we have. Before we go into SSAS, I just want to have a quick check. Are we all clear? Do we have any questions on SSIS? Or we can get started and see a demo on SSIS, how SSIS works. All right. How about others? Are we good? So now let's take a look how SSIS works. So how it works is that you have to have your SQL Server and Visual Studio installed. So once you have your SQL Server installed, go to Microsoft SQL Server 2014. There you will have an option called as SQL Server Data Tools for Visual Studio 2013. So what are the tools that you require? You require SQL Server and you require Visual Studio. So in our demo, we are using SQL Server 2014 and Visual Studio 2013. So open this. This opens up a window of Visual Studio. How you can create your MSBI project is go to File, go to New, go to Project. So this opens a new project window. If you go here in the left hand side, you see Business Intelligence. This gives you the option to create what are the project that you want to create. Do you want to use analysis services, integration services, or reporting services? You see, you have all these options. So in our case, we are creating an integration services project. So let's create an integration services project. Now let's try to save it somewhere here. Let's go here and save it in the demo part. Select this folder. Let's name this solution as SSIS project. This is flexible. If you want to name this on anything, you are free to name this. Click on OK. So now SSIS is opened. What all things can you see here? Let's try to explain one by one. Let's start with this. This is called as the Solution Explorer. This is the main part of your SSIS solution. You have your solution name, you have your project name, you have your parameters, what are the connections that you'll be using in your package, and by default it creates a default package called as package.dtsx. This is the Solution Explorer part. If you come here, this is the SSIS toolbox. What are the tools? These are called as tasks in SSIS world. What are the different tasks that you can use in SSIS? You see here, we have plethora of tasks, a lot of tasks available here. If you want to use an FTP task, if you want to connect to an FTP system, if you want to send a file, if you want to download a file, you can use FTP task. If you want to execute an SQL task connecting to a database, you can use that. This is the task window. So you can use all these kinds of tasks. Now you remember we were talking about SQL Server performance task, right? You see here we can perform CDC, change data capture. We can use execute SQL Server agent job. So you can run a job from here. If you want to shrink a database, if you want to reorganize an index, if you want to back up a database, all these things are available from here. So these things are there for you to use. This is our SSIS toolbox looks like. This is our package, the base of a package. Currently, we don't have anything in here. So that's why this is looking as blank. This is our package. If you come down here, we have our control flow. Then we have our data flow. So this window is actually called as a control flow. What we can do here, this actually tells the SSIS package which path to follow, which will be the flow if you execute your package. This is your data flow, where all your data related activity happens. Now just keep a look at the left hand side. What all tasks we have here? I am clicking on data flow task. You see all these tasks changed. Let me show you again. Control flow, we have all these tasks. Data flow, all these tasks are changed. What it means is that if you're in the control flow, if you want your SSIS to let the SSIS package know that which path to follow, these are the tasks which will help you to do that. If you go inside the data flow, what's going to happen is that these are the tasks which help you in either creating a source or a destination or transformation. Okay. If you go to parameters, you can set your parameters which will act as your variables, and you can perform operations on top of it. Event handlers, as I was explaining, what will happen in case any error happens on your package? You can perform an event handling operation here. If you go to Package Explorer, this will tell you what are the things which are there in your package. What are the things? These are your system level variables. Okay. This is how an SSIS package looks and feels like. Are we clear with the SSIS package? Shall we go ahead and create a new SSIS package and explain? Any questions till now? All right. So let's try to create an SSIS package and let's see how an SSIS package works. So what I'm going to do is I am going to load a flat file, this flat file, into a SQL table. Okay. This flat file it's an employee ID. We have the employee name and the department. Okay. We will try to load this flat file into a SQL Server data warehouse, and we'll see how best can we load it and what are the things we can perform here. So let me pull up the SQL Server Management Studio. All right, let it open up, and I'm connecting to localhost. Let's connect there. Let me create, I have already created a database. Okay. So let me try to load the data. Okay, let's see, do I have any tables? So let me go to a new query, and let me create a table so that we can store the data. Okay, is it opening in a different window? All right, so it's opening in a different window. Fine, not an issue. Let's connect here. Okay, so we have a database, a sample database called as MSBI. So we are going to create a table here. So if you see here, this is how my flat file looks like. So I have created my table same like that. We have an employee ID, which is an integer type, employee name, which is a varchar, and we have a department, which is also an integer. Okay. So let us create the table. So we have created the table, and currently it's coming as blank. All right. So let's go back to our SSIS package and let's see how we can do that. So let me explain what the business scenario we are going to do here. So what we're going to do here, maybe this is a live system. In this system, what is happening is that you are a developer. Your task is check if the file is present. So what happens, this file is an external file which comes from an external vendor. They are responsible to send you this file, and you being a developer, your task is to process this file, transform this file, use a transformation, and load it into a data warehouse. So there's an SLA that the file will be coming every day at 7 a.m. in the morning. So what you have to do when your SSIS package will run, you have your SSIS package scheduled to be run at 7 a.m. in the morning. Your SSIS package will take a look if the file is present or not. There can be a scenario where the vendor has missed to send the file. So you have to check if the file is present or not. If the file is not present, then you should stop execution of your SSIS package. If the file is present, then you should load it. Okay, that's what we're trying to do here. Now, once your execution is complete, you have to archive the file, because next day the same file is going to come with the updated data, right? So let us create a folder called archive here. And after the processing is complete, we have to move this file from our source folder to the archive folder. And let's see how we can do that using SSIS. So the scenario is clear what we're trying to do. We will check if the file is present. The vendor has sent the file. If the file is present, we will load the file. If the file is not present, we will stop the package execution. Once the file is loaded into our data warehouse using transformations, we will archive the file so that next day, again, the fresh set of file can arrive. This is something what we're trying to achieve using SSIS. Are we clear with the requirements? All right, so let's go ahead and let's see how we can do that. So first thing what I said, I have to check if the file is present or not. So if you go to this SSIS toolbox, I don't see any native task which looks and feels like can we check if the file present or not. So in that case, Microsoft has given you the flexibility to use scripts. Just drag this script task. This is how you work in SSIS. Let me delete this. Whichever task you want to use, just drag it and work on it. So if you look at this script task, what it does is that double click on this, it has option. Which language you want to use? Do you want to use C# or do you want to use VB? You are free to use the choice of your language. Okay. So let's say that we are using C# and to check if the file is present in the path or not. Now I was talking that we have variables in package. So how we can use variables is right click on the SSIS package, click on this variables. So let me create two variables, v file path. The data type of this variable is string. Okay, let me create one more variable, v file name. This will also be of string. Now what will be the value for my v file path? This will be the value for my v file path. Why? Because here only my source file is. And what will be the name for my file name? This will be the name for my file. Okay, let me copy this. This will be the name. Okay. Okay, so Neil is asking, are these two only scripting languages supported? Yes, in SSIS, you are to use either C# or VB. These are the only two languages which are supported in SSIS. Okay. All right. So we have created our variables where we have our file path and the file name. Now let's double click on the script. I'll be creating my script using C#. Okay. Click on this read only variables. Okay. Click on here. You see here we have our system level variables which you can use, and we have our user level variables also. So let's select these user level variables. Why am I selecting is because I will be creating this to check if my file is present or not, right? Click on OK. Click on OK. But we have to check one more thing. If my file is present, we have to proceed. This is a data flow task. Just tag this here. Okay. What happens in your data flow task? You will be actually performing the data load operation. Okay. So my logic is that if my file is present, then I should execute the data flow task, right? You see this green color arrow? Drag this and connect it here. Now you see this is a unidirectional arrow. It's starting from the script task and going to the data flow task, which means is that first your script task is going to run. This green means is that if it's successful, it's going to pass the control to your data flow task. Okay. This is how this works, and this is called as a precedence constraint. Okay. So I have to execute the data flow task based on the script task if the script task is successful, right? In the script task, what I'm going to do, I'm going to check if the file exists or not. after the data flow task is successful, if the data is loaded successfully, I will archive the task. How will I archive the task? I will come to that in just a sec. So I have to send, somehow I have to send an information to the data flow task to update him if the file is present or not, right? How we can do that? Let's take a look how we can do that. Let me create one more variable saying name as v file exists, and let me name it as integer. Let's go to script task. Instead of going to my read-only variables, read-only variable means these are only readable. You cannot write on anything. If you go to read-write variable, you can use a variable on which you can write. Okay. Let's check this one and take this one. Click on OK. Now go to this edit script, and here actually we will be writing our script to check if the file is present or not. Okay. So how we can check if the file is present or not? Let's go here into the namespace. This namespace is actually all the header files which contains all the classes and methods required for the script task to run, for C# to run. So in order for us to work with the files, we have to use a namespace called system.io. Use this. This is a namespace which contains all the file related classes and variables and the methods. So let's try here. What I'm doing is if file dot exists. I am checking if the file exists or not. Where? In my path. So, and this file dot exists, this actually takes the complete path. Okay, so how we can assign the SSIS variables? This is the process. DTS dot variables, your variable name dot value dot toString. This gives me the path, right? But it needs the complete path. So what we do here, we're concatenating, and what we're going to do here, now we need the file name because it needs the complete path to check. Same thing, DTS dot variables dot value dot toString. So this code actually what it does it, if the file is present, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that again we're using the SSIS variable. So what I'm essentially saying is that if the file is present, this is a file.exists method. It determines whether the specified file exists. So in the complete path, you have to give the complete path. If the file is present, set the value of this variable as 1. Else, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that set the value of this variable as 0. Okay. This is the code I'm writing. For a sanity check, just build it so that we see that everything is fine. Build succeeded, so our code is fine. Okay. Now in the script task, I am checking if the file is present or not. How will I pass the control if the file is present? Double click on this precedence constraint. Go to this expression and constraint. Go here and select it from here, all the variables. So I am saying that if the value of this variable is 1, then only pass the control. That means the file is present, right? Click on OK. Now you see we have created a precedence constraint. If the value of this output variable is 1, then only it's going to pass the control to my data flow task. Okay, clear on this what we just did? Now we'll go to the data flow task and see how the DFT works. All right. So let's go into the data flow task and let's try to load the data. Just double click on this data flow task and you see all these things are here. So pull in this source assistant. This asks you what kind of source you want to create. I want to create a flat file source. Click on new, click on OK. Where is my flat file? Browse. Here is my flat file. If I go to my browse, select the flat file. This is my flat file. Go to columns and we see you have a file populated. Okay, click on OK. And you see we have the flat file source and the connection manager automatically populated. Now, what are these tasks? These are all the transformation tasks. If you want to use a lookup, if you want to use an OLEDB command, all these things are available. Union all these things. So let's say that in our business requirement, what the business wants is that They want to load the data by sorting the employee ID. You see here, this is not sorted. They want to sort the employee ID and load the data. Okay, this is a business requirement. How we can do that? Come here. You see, there is a transformation called sort. Again, drag it here. Create the connection from flat file. Double click on the sort. It's saying that how you want to sort. So what my business requirement is that I want to sort on employee ID. Select this. How you want to sort? Ascending. Yes, I want to sort on ascending. Click on OK. Now you're not supposed to, you're not bound to use only one transformation. If your business requires you to use multiple transformation, you can use all those transformations. For our scenario, we just need to use one transformation. We have done that. Now let me click our destination assistant. We want to load it into our SQL server. Click on new, click on OK. It's asking me, where do you want to connect? I want to connect to localhost. What is the database that you want to connect? I want to connect to MSBI. This is how you create a connection manager in SSIS. Test connection succeeded. Click on OK. And my connection manager is already created. Now what we have to do, we have to load the data, right? So we have to create a mapping. If you double click on here, this window opens where you have to map it to your table. So we map it to our employee table. Go to mappings. You see, automatically SSIS created the mapping. If you want to change it manually, you can change it. It created the mapping. Click on OK and our data flow task is done. Okay. Now the third option that I said is that after my data flow task is done, I want to archive the file, right? How we can do that? We have a file system task. Drag this. This file system task actually helps you in operating with files. So again, I'm dragging this precedence constraint here, which means is that once my data flow task completes, I want to pass the control to my file system task. Double click on this file system task. What is the operation that you want to perform? I want to move my file. Okay. It's saying that what is your source connection? Which is your source file? Click on here. Click on new connection. Is it an existing file? Yes, it's an existing file. Click on here. Select this package. Sorry, select this file. Click on OK. Now saying that what is your destination? Where do you want to keep it? Again, create a new connection. Here, let's select that it's an existing folder because we want to pass the control into where? We want to pass the control into archive. Select OK. Click OK. What we're saying is that select this file and push it to this folder. This is what our business scenario looks like. Are we clear with the business scenario? Shall we execute and try to take a look how it works? All right. So let me execute this package. How you execute it? Right click, execute package. So you see my script task ran. It's successful. Okay. So getting a question in case of failure, how do we know? So let me just run this package and fail it explicitly so that we get to know. Okay. So what happened? Let's see first if my data is loaded. And yes, we have loaded the data and see it sorted the data also. Now let's see if my file is archived. You see here, there is no file here. If I go to my archive, it archives the file. Okay. Now let's do a sanity check if my script is working fine because now I don't have a file. So if I run this package now, you see it did not pass the control here. You see here. So this is how SSIS works. The script task checked if the file is present. If yes, load the data. If the data is loaded successfully, archive the file. If the file is not present, I don't want to pass the control to the data flow task itself because what's going to happen? The data flow task is going to fail. So let me show you how it fails. I'm just eliminating this constraint. So what will happen if the file present or not? It's going to pass the control to my data flow task. If I execute this package, you see my data flow task failed. If I go to this progress bar, here it says that cannot open the data file employee data.txt. Okay, this is how if an error happens, you get to see in the error. If I go to my data flow task now, you see it failed while trying to open the source. Okay, does that help you with the errors? All right. So this is how we can work in SSIS. There are a lot of other features which are available. We can use it to leverage in our business needs. Okay, clear on the SSIS part? Any questions or shall we proceed? All right, so let's proceed then and let's see what else do we have in our slides. Okay, let me go to my SSAS now. So let's look into the SSAS part, what we have in SSAS, right? Let's look into SSAS. So once your data is loaded into your data warehouse, the next step that you want to do is you want to analyze the data, right? So how you can analyze the data? It has to be stored in a centralized system, which is your data warehouse, which is divided into data marts. Now, what do I mean by data marts? Data marts, let me give you a real life scenario. If you go to a supermarket, you go in the supermarket and see that all the supermarket items are stacked into multiple marts. If you go to the grocery, you will find only grocery. If you go to the hardware part, you will find the hardware items. You will not find that some hardware items are there with the grocery and some groceries are there with the hardware. They are not mixed up. That's how we organize the data in our data warehouse also. If you have customer related data, those will have only customer related data. So that's a customer data mart. If you have accounts related data, those will have only account related data. That's in the account data mart. Segregating our data, creating different groups, those are called as data mart. Okay. Now once a data mart is created, SSAS uses OLAP components and data mining capabilities, which are a result of a multi-dimensional structure called cubes, which pre-calculates and store complex aggregations to build mining models. Okay. Here you can use your cube and you can build your data mining operations. Now, what is a cube that consists of? Cubes are multidimensional data sources. It constitutes of dimensions and measures. What are dimensions and what are measures? Dimensions will have the master data like employee name, employee address, geography, pin codes, and state names and all these things. Those will be part of your dimension data. This is part of your data modeling, which is a multidimensional modeling. Measures will have the aggregations. What do I mean by aggregations? Is that they will only have quantifiable components. So for an example, your sales amount. For an example, your loan amount. All these things will be there in your measures, which you can quantify. And constituting dimensions and measures, you get your cube. Okay. This is how a cube looks like. So let me show you how to create a cube and how you can work in a cube. Okay. So let me explain what we're trying to do here. In SQL Server 2014, we have a sample database called AdventureWorks DW 2014. This is a model word database which is provided by Microsoft free of cost. Here, if you go to the tables, you have your data stored into dimensions and measures. Fact are nothing but your measures. Dimensions are your dim tables. So we will leverage the same thing and we will try to create how a cube looks like. Okay. Same thing we're going to do here. Let me close all this because I'm done with my SSIS work. Again, we're going to go to SQL Server Data Tools. Go to the same path, File, New, Project. But instead of selecting Integration Services, we will go to Analysis Services and select Analysis Services Multi-Dimensional Data Mining. Okay. Let me name it as SSAS. What can we name it as? SSAS underscore project. Okay. Click on OK. And this is the window that comes here. Since we don't have any SSIS related things here, so this SSIS toolbox coming as blank. Let me close this. Now, once we have our SSAS project, what all things we can do here? First, you have to go to your data source and create the data source that you want to connect to. Right click, new data source. This wizard opens. In this wizard, it tells you which is the data source that you want to connect. Click on new. Here it's saying what is the server that you want to connect. Localhost. What is the database that you want to connect? AdventureWorks DW 2014. Test connection. Succeeded. Click on OK. Click on next. How do you want to connect? There are different options. Let's select the service account. Click on next. Click on finish. This is just the name that is asking. So let us keep this name for the time being. Keep us finish. Now we have the data source created called as DS. Next thing is that what we have to do is we have to create our data source views. How to do that? Click on this. Click on next. It's saying that which is the data source that you want to connect to. I am saying that this is my existing data source, connect to my existing data source only. Click on next. Now I have all the tables which are required for me to perform my analysis. Which all tables I require? What all the fact tables and what all dimension tables are required? So let's say that for our scenario, we want to perform an analysis where how much was the sales, how much was the internet sales for some customer for a specific product. So how we can do that? Select fact internet sales, select dim product and select dim customer. Okay. So what I'm saying is that this is a business scenario on which how you want to perform an analysis. My business scenario saying me is that you have to perform an analysis on for certain products, for certain customers, how much was the sales for a specific period. So if you come to period, then we need something, something kind of a data. So how we can get the data? Let's select something called as dim date. Where is my dim date? Let me just try to find out. Here is my dim date. Select this. So dim product will have the product related information. Dim customer will have the customer related information. Date will give me the date parameters, and fact internet sales. This is a measure. This will actually give me all the information how my sales has happened. Click on next. It's saying that these are the tables that you have selected. Do you want to finish it? Yes, click on finish. And now you see it created my data source view. What are the tables we have selected? Now you might be asking why this kind of picture came. What are these arrows? These arrows actually mean is that how this table is connected to the other table. Now when we talk about this fact tables and dimension tables, we are talking about multi-dimensional model, right? So multi-dimensional model, what will happen is that we will have our data stored in different organizations. Fact tables will have our quantifiable information and dimension tables will have our property, and they will be connected using a primary key foreign key relationship. This is how a dimensional model works. That's why you see all these arrows are coming. Okay, this is how you create your data source and data source view. So what are the differences between them? Data source is actually you're creating a connection to the server and the database. In the data source view, you're actually selecting the tables which are required. All right. Now the next and the most important thing is creating a cube. How you create a cube? Right click, click on new cube. This wizard opens, click on next. It's saying that do you want to use the existing tables? Yes, I want to use the existing tables. Click on next. It's saying that for the measure groups, which all tables you want to use? This is my measure group. So I will select fact internet sales. Click on next. So what are the properties you want to select from the measure group? Let's select all these properties. Click on next. Now it's saying what are the dimension tables that you want to use? I want to use dim date, correct, dim customer, correct, dim product. I don't want to use fact table for my dimension. So just deselect that. Click on next. Are these the properties that you want to select? Yes. What is the name for your cube? This. Okay. Click on finish. And now you see we get our cube created. Okay. We get our cube created. All these things are here. Now these are the different options that you can perform on your cube to analyze your data. Okay. Now what will happen? How you can see this cube? Let us try to deploy our cube and let's see how we can work on this cube. Just right click and click on this deploy. So it's deploying. It deployed successfully. So let's go back to our management studio. Let's connect to our cube services and let's see how my cube looks like. So this is the cube that we created. Go to the database, you see SSAS project. If I scroll this cube, right click on this cube and click on browse. You see we have all our measures here, fact internet sales, and we have all our data related to dimension here. So let's say that if I want to select the sales amount, so let's select internet sales amount. Let's select sales amount. Let's select sales amount from here. And if I want to see based on which date my date is coming, select this. So you see, we can select it here for 2010. Let's select one more customer also here. So for this customer, for this date, this was the total sales amount that we can have. And now coming back to our cube, if you want to perform other operations, if you want to perform any new actions, if you want to perform any aggregations, all these things you can perform from here by going into the cube and analyzing and creating your business intelligence here. Okay, this is how you create your cube, you deploy and you browse your cubes. Are we good? Any questions? All right, we are good. So let's go back to our slide and let's see what else do we have. So now let's talk about SSRS. SSRS, it stands for SQL Server Reporting Services. It is used to gain insights about the analysis. So now we have analyzed our data, right? The final step is creating the reports. So I'm getting a question, how does SSIS differ from DTS, Data Transformation Services? Okay. So let me give you a little bit of background about how SSIS came into the picture. So SQL Server 2000, when we were working with SQL Server 2000, at that time we had data transformation services known as DTS. With the release of SQL Server 2005, Microsoft ushered a new era of ETL applications called SSIS. DTS was very much, not very much feature rich. It had very basic functionalities. In 2005, Microsoft came up with SSIS that had a lot of feature compared to DTS. DTS, whatever things were not there, SSIS had all. On top of it, certain more advantageous things. So this is the new way of working with the ETL. This is called as SSIS. And in 2005 going forward, they have gradually added features to SSIS. DTS development is now completely dead. We have moved to SSIS. And this is the kind of difference between DTS and SSIS. Does that help? All right. So once we have created our cubes and we have created our works and everything, how we can work with that is if we only can create a report. So our business users are going to look into the reports and they can perform their analysis. They can perform their business scenarios and they can take the decisions. So reports are the something that is very good for visualization. So we can create our reports using SQL Server reporting services and we can publish them in dashboards, Excel, SharePoint, all these places. Okay. So what are the differences between reports, scorecards, and dashboard? To analyze the data, it makes us a rich visualization. So you can create charts, you can create drill down, drill through reports, interactive sorts, and all these things you can perform in SQL Server reporting services. If you want to perform all these things, this SQL Server reporting services comes handy. Further to that, we can deploy the reports over the web for greater accessibility. You can deploy the reports over the web. SQL Server does support that, and anybody who has permission to go, they can go and access that. These reports you can publish in SharePoint also, so that if you want to share it with a complete team, they can go ahead and take a look into the reports. Okay. Before we move in, let me take a look and let me explain how a reporting services works and how a report looks like. Okay. So let me pull up my trusty SQL Server data tools. And this time, let's create a new project. But this time, what we'll be creating? We will be creating a reporting services. Okay. So let me create a report server project. Let me name it as SSRS underscore reports. Click on OK. And this opens up another window for us. What it's saying is that data sources, data sets, and reports. Data sources, as the name suggests, this is something that you can connect to your server. Right click here, add new data source. Okay. Where you want to connect? I can connect to all these places. Let me connect to SQL Server. Where I want to connect? Localhost. What is the database? Let's connect to our MSBI. Do a test connection. Succeeded. Click on OK. Click on OK. Now you see we have our data source created. Let's go to reports. add new item, select a report, and let's create a report. So let me name this as employee underscore report. Okay, and it opens a new report window. Okay, this is how you work with your report data. All right. So you see here in the report I have data source, on the solution I have data source, on the report I have data set, and the solution also have data set. Why they are repeating? To answer to that question is that if you go to the solution, they are called as shared data sources and shared data set. Shared data source and shared data set means whatever data source or data set that you create here, these will be shared across all the reports in your solution. But if you create it here at the report level, those will be only for the reports. Now you will ask me the question, what is the difference between data source and data set? So to answer that question, let me do something in the report and let me explain. So I have created a shared data source. You are very okay to use an embedded data source also. But what's going to happen if you create a shared data source? It will have an advantage when you deploy this. Okay. So let me try to create a data source here. I go ahead and create a data source here. I say that use the shared data source reference because I already have a shared data source. Select this, click on OK. Now what is this data set? Data set will actually give you the output of the query. So what I'm going to do is we just loaded this table. We are going to select from this table and create a report based on that. Okay, click on this data set, add data set. It's saying that do you want to use a shared data set or an embedded one? I am saying that use an embedded one. What is the data source that you are using? I am using this data source. In this window, you can either write your SQL queries or stored procedures. I am writing my SQL query, just paste it here. Do a refresh fields, go to the fields, and you see we have got our fields populated. Okay, click on OK. Now we have our data source and data set. So data source will actually connect to the server in the database, and data set will actually fetch the actual data for you. Now once we have our data source and data set populated, how we can display the report? Very simple. Right click here, insert table. Okay, and what are the things we want to display? We want to display employee ID, we want to display employee name, and we want to display department. Okay, and let's first take a look how this looks like, this report. Go to this preview, and this is how my report is looking like. Okay, now this report looks very dull. I don't like it. Let's say that I want to do something. Let me do one thing. Let me insert a page header. Okay, so let me insert a text box in the page header, and let me say that this report is called as employee report. Okay, let's say that this is called as employee report. Okay, and I'm saying that this should come in bold. This should be a little bigger. You see all these things I can do from here. Okay, now I'm saying that this is not looking good. Let me change something here. This is not looking that great. So how I can do that? Let me show you how we can do that. Let's say that I want this to come in bold. Select the whole window, make it at bold. I say that let me change the background color. I go to the background color, select this color, and the background color changes. Okay, you see now if I try to look at the report, let's see how my report looks like. I'm just removing all the white spaces if they are there. So remove all the white spaces. Now if I go to the preview, you see now my report is looking something like this. Now if the business says that, okay, so you see the employee ID is coming as right aligned. I don't want that. I want the employee ID to be left aligned. I said, okay, how I can do that? Right click on this, go to the text box properties, go to the alignment, change this to left, click on OK, go to preview. You see now it's looking as good. Now they're saying that, okay, so the department is coming like this. So what we can do, see the data is coming as 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 9. It's sorted by employee ID. But how about, can we sort it by department? Is that possible? my data is coming from the table, which is sorted from here. But my business says that, can we sort it by department? I say that, okay, let's see how we can do that. Go to the table properties, go to the sorting, add a sort here, sort by department. How? A to Z, click on OK, go to preview, and you see now my data is sorted by my department. So you see, these are just the certain functionalities that we can perform in SSRS. There are a lot of functionalities more that we can perform in SSRS. This is how a simple report looks like. Are you clear with the report development? Any questions? All right, so now we have done our report, we have developed our report. The next thing would be to deploy the reports, right? So that our users can see the reports, correct? How we can do that? Let's go to the Solution Explorer, go to the properties here. So I'm getting a question, what are the different kinds of reports we can create in SSRS? Okay, so that's a very good question. So I have just shown you what kind of reports we can create. We can create a tabular report. This is a tabular report. So let's say that if you want to create some other report. So if I go here, you see we have different types of reports available. If you want to use a matrix, you can use a matrix. If you want to use a chart, let me show you using a chart. So if you click on this chart, it opens all these kinds of options. You have column chart, line chart, shape, bar, area, and all things. Let me select a column chart, click on OK, and it opens a column chart like this. All right. So how you can assign the values here? If you go to the values, select, let's say I'm selecting employee ID here. Let's select in the category groups, I am selecting department. Okay. This is a simple chart report. So let's try to see how this chart report now looks like. If I go to preview, you see along with my employee ID, employee name, and department, this is showing me in a chart. Okay. Let's say that I'm not sure, I'm not liking quite that is a chart title. Let me name it as employee chart. Okay. It's saying that axis title, this is actually department. And this axis title, no, this is not looking good. Let me rename this to EMPID. All right, let's go back in a preview and you see this is how it looks like. Okay, looks good. All right. Okay, so let me save this. Okay, now let me show you how our deployment works. Okay, so let me do one thing. Let me go to the report manager and let me explain what is a report manager. So if I go to Internet Explorer, this is how my report manager looks like. Now you will come and ask me, what is a report manager, right? A report manager is something where you publish and host your report. So let me open the solution, the SSRS one. Okay, this is how my report manager looks like. Let me pull up the solution, demo, SSRS reports. All right, we've opened this. This is my report manager. There is one more thing called as report server. Okay, now what are the differences between report server and report manager? Report server is actually the whole server. So when SSRS gets installed into a system, it installs the report server. What is a report server? Where the report metadata are going to be stored. Report manager is mostly used by users or let's say some admins to perform certain activities. So this looks better. Server is just a plain simple thing. It just hosts everything. So what we're going to do is, let's try to deploy the reports here and see how they looks like. Go to the properties of the report. And if you see here, it's saying that what is the target data set folder, data source folder, report folder, and all these things. So if you don't have anything created here, currently it's blank. It's saying that the report manager is going to create all these things. Okay. But it's asking is, what is the target server URL? Just give the target server URL, click on OK, just hit on deploy. If you hit on deploy, it's deploying all these things. So just wait for a sec. So deployment is complete. if I go ahead and refresh this, you see now we have all these things in our report manager. We have our data sources automatically created. We have our reports automatically created. If I go ahead and you see, it's executing the reports and it will give the report. See, it gave the report. So now you don't have to rely on your development activities. You just publish your reports and that report will be published in a web portal that is your report manager, and anybody who has access can go ahead and check in the report. Okay. This is how our SSRS works. All right. Any questions on SSRS parts? All right. So this was a quick overview of our MSBI part, how our SSIS, SSAS and SSRS works, and how we can leverage the power of MSBI to implement our work, the BI performance. So that's pretty much that we had for us today. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. Okay, I'm getting a question. How is MSBI different from Power BI? Okay, so MSBI stands for Microsoft BI. This is something that we just discussed. It constitutes of SSIS, SSAS and SSRS. Power BI is an online portal only dedicated for reporting. That's something that Microsoft has come up with. That's called as Power BI, but it only has reporting capabilities. It does not have ETL, does not have analytics. You can only create reports using Power BI. Okay. All right. How about others? Are we all good? Or do I have some questions from anybody? All right. People are clear. Can I get some responses from everybody so that we are good? All right. Thank you guys. I hope that I was able to share some knowledge with you. I had a good time sharing with you. I hope that all of you had a good time. Thank you all for joining. I hope to see you further again. All right. Thank you all for joining. Have a good day ahead. Bye, people.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply to them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to our Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!